Welcome to our weekly briefing call. I am Lizerbram, president of Jewish National Fund USA. It was incredible to see so many of you among the 2,500 Israel supporters who came together just a week and a half ago in Denver, Colorado, for our global conference for Israel. I feel like a JNF Globetrotter as of today. I'm coming to you live from Israel, along with 80 friends of JNF-USA on our first volunteer trip. We arrived Sunday. First thing Monday morning, we were working on a farm with JNF-USA affiliate partner Hashomer Hakadash. We weeded to prevent crops from dying. Later that afternoon, we were at the Alexander Muss High School campus, where we packed Hanukkah gifts for boxes to be distributed to needy families evacuated from the western Negev communities that were savagely attacked by Hamas. Yesterday morning, we were back in the fields cultivating crops. Then later in the afternoon, we made a visit to Soroka Hospital, bringing gift boxes to wounded soldiers and civilians. Today, found us on a army base packing supplies. Tomorrow is our final day and another busy day where we will provide support at Adi Negev, the JNF-USA sponsored therapy hospital and residential care campus. This has been by far one of the most rewarding experiences Lauren and I have ever been part of in our 35 years of involvement with JNF-USA. Already more than 900 people have registered for one of our weekly volunteer trips, which are currently scheduled to run through March. If you're interested in participating, go to jnf.org/travel, and you will see which trips have available slots. I will go off script just for a moment to tell you some personal experiences. We visited, Russell and I and some of the staff visited with about 6 mayors in the communities in the South. Every one of those mayors said to us that within 24 hours after October 7th, we responded by giving their needs whatever they asked for. They didn't have to beg for it. We called them, our staff in Israel called each mayor, asked what they needed and how much they needed. And it ranged from diapers to washing machines, because so many people were displaced into hotel rooms, like a family of 4 into a single hotel room. So they needed food, they needed basic supplies. They got there with no clothes. Every mayor said that if it wasn't for JNF, they really don't know what they would do, and they could have done, because the government was busy doing other things, let's say, and could not respond to these daily needs. So the reception was overwhelming. There was tears from the people that live in the communities and just thanking us for within 24 hours delivering whatever they need. So with that, it's now my pleasure to introduce Israeli government spokesperson Eylon Levy. Eylon is a former international media advisor to the President of Israel and former TV news anchor. Born and raised in the UK, he studied at the universities of Oxford and Cambridge before making Aliyah and serving in the IDF. Thank you, Eylon, for being here, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you very much. You know, after so many TV interviews, and especially a few hostile interviews, it's good to be able to speak to friends and supporters of Israel. When what happened on October 7th, Israeli society came together in the most amazing way, especially considering all the division and polarization inside Israel over the last year, the last few years. People dropped everything and dedicated themselves and all their time and resources towards that goal of victory. And that's not just in Israel, that's around the world as well. Jews around the diaspora also putting everything to one side and coming together to support Israel and redouble the efforts that they've made in previous years. And I know that Jewish National Fund USA has done such incredible work as well over the past few years, and especially since 10/7, to support Israel at this dark moment, reminding us we're all in the same boat and we're all part of the same family. So first of all, thank you very much for all your efforts. We're now in a critical and difficult stage of the fighting in Gaza. Israel announced after the October 7 massacre 3 goals: the destruction of Hamas so it can never hurt our people again, the return of all the hostages, and the creation of conditions in the Gaza Strip, as President Biden himself has said on so many occasions, to make sure that Gaza can never pose a threat to Israel. The first stage of the fighting took place until we had managed to put enough military pressure on Hamas that it was willing to release hostages. And we got, over the space of 7 days, 110 hostages out. I think it was 7 days, 110 hostages out. It's a huge achievement. It's not enough because we still have 135 still in the Gaza Strip. Maybe you heard the number 137. But yesterday we brought back the bodies of 2 hostages who had been murdered in captivity. And we have 135 still in Gaza, 19 of whom have been murdered by Hamas since 10/7. After that hostage release pause, Hamas decided to resume hostilities on December 1st. And we find ourselves now in a new stage of fighting. We are close to mopping everything up in the north of Gaza. We have seen hundreds of terrorists surrender to the IDF as their morale collapses, and the Hamas's grip on power also collapses in Gaza. And we're encircling their strongholds in Jabalia and Shaja'iyah, in Khan Yunis, entering in, going closer to the centers of Hamas power. It is a dangerous battle. This morning, the whole nation's heart broke to see that 10 of our finest sons had been killed in battle, in intense face-to-face fighting. I think sometimes the international media present this as if it were purely an aerial bombardment instead of actual close quarter fighting, where our soldiers are going door to door, uncovering terror infrastructure. And they are fighting terrorists who are disguised as civilians and operating out of civilian buildings in civilian areas. We are finding tunnel shafts in universities, in mosques, in schools, in people's homes. There was even a tunnel shaft that was found under a child's bed, and a mattress compartment that was found full of RPGs and anti-tank missiles. So it's a very difficult battle for our forces now as they work to dismantle the Hamas terror state, and they work to destroy the terror infrastructure that Hamas has spent the last 16 years building in civilian areas, because Hamas's whole strategy is based on human shields. It is based on attacking our people and then hiding behind their people in the hope that they will be able to evade justice. And we've said after 10/7, no, we're going after the whole of Hamas's terror infrastructure. And to do that, we're asking civilians to get out of the way, but we will ultimately go after all of Hamas's terror infrastructure. Now we have a problem. The problem is that some of the nations that understood immediately after 10/7 what happened and why we have no choice but to go and to destroy Hamas are perhaps losing their nerve. Not the United States. The United States is standing shoulder to shoulder with us, and President Biden could not have been clearer on a million opportunities that this war must end with the end of Hamas, and the US will make sure that Israel has everything it needs in order to destroy Hamas. But Hamas is pursuing a sick and twisted strategy to try to get as many people on their own side killed, to manufacture as grave a humanitarian crisis as possible, in the hopes that those images will generate sympathy. That sympathy will generate diplomatic pressure, and that diplomatic pressure will cause Israel to stop defending itself. Now, we won't. We're going all the way to the end. The goal of this war is that it must be safe for children to sleep in their beds in Kfar Aza and Be'eri and Nir Oz, even meters away from the Gaza Strip. We set what I called in yesterday's press conference the diplomat babysitter test. This war will end when the diplomats at the United Nations who are voting to keep Hamas on life support will feel safe taking responsibility to babysit children in Kfar Aza. Until they feel safe doing that, we're going to continue fighting Hamas until we bring down the Hamas terror state. By the way, after the awful lapse of judgment yesterday when so many nations voted to keep Hamas on life support, we wouldn't let any of those ambassadors near our children anyway. But that's a different matter. We are fighting so that those children can go back to their homes. We can build Kfar Aza and Be'eri and Nir Oz. And I'm sure that the Jewish National Fund USA is going to be a central partner as well in making sure that life can flourish and be rebuilt in the areas that were so brutally destroyed on October 7. So on that note, I think it would be most useful to hear from you what questions you have. I wish I could stay and spend all evening talking to you. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to hop in a while for another interview. So let's take your questions if you want to write them in the chat. And let's see what questions you have. Am I moderating these questions, or someone else wants to pick them?
We're in an audience in Israel with about 75 or 80 people. I might ask also if there's any questions from the audience. Does anybody have a question that they'd like me to repeat to Eylon? Okay,
so let's see what questions we have here. I'm sending a link, by the way, where you'll have links to my various social media platforms. Just correcting, there was someone above who wrote my Instagram, and that's not the correct handle. So if you want to connect on Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, any of the apps, you can go into that and that'll direct you. Okay, there's a question from Holly Rosenberg. How could Hamas build all those tunnels in Israel and Gaza? Didn't anyone know the tunnels were being built? Holly, everyone knew those tunnels were being built. Everyone. And we think it is outrageous that the World Health Organization has covered up Hamas's crimes for so long. The Red Cross has covered up Hamas's crimes for so long. Even after we uncovered those tunnels underneath the Shifa hospital, they continue to run propaganda for Hamas, accusing Israel of targeting healthcare infrastructure instead of admitting the truth, that Hamas built tunnels under that hospital and used it for military purposes. And I think the reason they can't admit that truth is it would show the extent of their complicity, that they knew and they were silent. So yes, they knew. And we are demanding clear answers from these agencies, why they didn't say anything, and what they plan to do in the future in order to prevent terror organizations from exploiting hospitals for military purposes ever again. Because this isn't just about Israel. They failed us. It's not just about the Palestinians. They've definitely failed them. It's about the whole architecture of international peace and security and the institutions that we rely on to advance the goals of our common humanity. And if we can't rely on them because we know they're covering up for terror organizations, that's a serious problem for the whole world. So they knew. They knew, and they're still covering it up. Thank you. What is happening in the north? Since 10/7, Hamas has been trying to escalate this conflict by getting other actors to enter the war. It tried immediately to get Palestinians in the West Bank to join in the fighting and grab knives and guns and start attacking Israelis. And it's been trying to drag Hezbollah in the north into attacking Israel. And for the last 2 months, we have been grappling with unprovoked aggression from Hezbollah that has been firing rockets at Israel, firing rockets and forcing us to evacuate the whole border zone. We have 250,000 internally displaced persons in Israel. People forget this, north and south. They cannot go back to their homes until it is safe to do so. And we're dealing with rocket fire just yesterday that set off the red alert siren in Acre and set off and was intercepted by the Iron Dome. Now, our strategy at the moment is to destroy Hamas in Gaza in response to 10/7 and to deter Hezbollah in the north. And we have been responding forcefully to all Hezbollah aggression, and we have been warning them in no uncertain terms that if Hezbollah chooses to drag us into a full-scale war that we are not interested in, but if Hezbollah drags us into a full-scale war, it will be making the mistake of a lifetime. The consequences for Hezbollah as a terror organization and for the state of Lebanon that is hosting its armed attacks on us will be severe. And the Prime Minister has said, if this happens, if Lebanon drags us into a full-scale war, Beirut is going to look like Gaza City. And we hope that that warning is clear enough to Hezbollah, together with the United States sending 2 battle carrier groups into the region. If you're thinking of messing with us, don't do it. What can we do to try to change international public opinion? Speak up. Speak up. Make your voices heard. If it's on social media, whether it is writing letters to newspapers or phone-ins on the radio or joining protests or putting up posters of hostages, even if they're going to get torn down half an hour later. We all have incredible power to speak up and make our voices heard. And when we do that together, like we say on Hanukkah, each of us is a little flame, and all together we create a lot of light. We have a big opportunity to create change. The other side is noisy. It is hateful. It uses violence and it uses intimidation. And in the face of that violence and intimidation, we have to be extra proud and extra loud. And we can't allow ourselves to be intimidated, because a vast majority of public opinion, I don't think, is against us. These are normal people, good people, who understand that people on both sides are shouting, and we need to be the more humane, we need to be the more moral, the more reasonable, and not allow the intimidation tactics against us and the Gaza lighting, where they tried to convince us we're crazy, to defeat us. TikTok social media bots. How and your team are fighting back on social media? We're building a social media war machine to try to combat what we're seeing online. Since the beginning of the war, my personal Twitter account has added 125,000 followers, and my tweets have had about 350 million impressions since the start of the war. That's just my personal Twitter account, and that's not to mention the IDF and the Foreign Ministry, which have millions of followers apiece and many more impressions. TikTok as well. I've opened a TikTok account. If you told me that a horrific war would lead to me having a TikTok manager, I wouldn't know what you were talking about. But I have a TikTok manager now. She's an amazing young woman from Canada who is helping me appeal to the young 16-year-old girl demographic. And so we're doing all sorts of shticks and tricks and silly gimmicks to try to appeal to a younger audience as well. There's serious Eylon, who stands and does a press conference that gets taken by BBC Live, and gimmicks where we try to get onto all the trends that are happening on TikTok and appeal to them as well. The problem is it's a numbers game. There are simply far fewer of us than there are of them, and algorithms like things that go viral. And when you have a much bigger audience that is receptive to Palestinian messages, it's easier for their stuff to go viral than for ours. So that's why we have to fight extra hard. That's why every interview I do, I get it subtitled, I push it online and try to think of the most creative and provocative way to put it out there. And if you want to click on the link I sent you and follow me on Instagram and Twitter and the other platforms and hit repost, you can help spread the message, and we can try to make some things viral.
And alone,
What do you have to say about the emergency session at the UN yesterday? That no UN Secretary General in history has gone so far to secure the survival of a terror organization. They use the word humanitarian ceasefire, and what they mean is keeping Hamas on life support. That is the meaning of any end to the fighting that doesn't end with the end of Hamas. It's as simple as that. And we're noticing inconsistencies in our allies' foreign policy, things that just don't make sense. Australia, Canada, and New Zealand put out a joint statement calling for a sustainable ceasefire. And in the same statement, they call on Hamas to lay down its arms. Well, which is it? You want a ceasefire with Hamas, or do you want Hamas to surrender? Because we also want Hamas to surrender. But if it's going to ignore that very polite communique from the Prime Minister of Canada, then we're going to keep fighting Hamas until it runs out of fire. That is the reality of what happened at the United Nations. I know Australia tried to spin it as We want to get humanitarian aid in and the hostages out. And if that's what it were all about, we would do the same. We also would gladly pause the fighting for a few days to get the hostages out. But that is not what the proposal was. This was a resolution to shield Hamas from the consequences of the 10/7 massacre and keep it free while it is promising another 10/7 massacre, and even worse, to leave it emboldened, because it's threatening another 10/7 massacre, and it will think that the world will stand behind it and tie Israel's hands and stop it defending itself and its people if we're attacked again. So I think international historians are one day going to discuss at length how international institutions were hijacked in such a way to try to secure the survival of a terror organization. But that's going to happen in a while, and it'll happen after Israel's total victory over Hamas. With Israel's success, have we seen a reduction in missile launches from Gaza? Yes, we haven't heard any in Tel Aviv today, and I think you might have just jinxed it now. Yes, Hamas has a large silo of 75-kilometer missiles. And when we pushed Hamas out of Gaza City, Tel Aviv was no longer in range of the 75-kilometer missiles. And so we've seen far fewer attempted missile strikes on Tel Aviv. We've seen a few because they still have longer range missiles, and even the 75-kilometer ones reach places like Rishon, which is just literally next door to Tel Aviv. But as the army has been going through Gaza, we've been catching a lot of these rockets and destroying a lot of the arsenal. And so we've definitely seen a drop in the rocket fire as a result of pushing Hamas further south, capturing and destroying a lot of their arms. But we mustn't forget, Hamas still sits on a fearsome arsenal. They're also preparing for a long war, and so they don't want to waste all their ammo in overnight as well. We need you to appear on American cable news stations. I've been on Fox, CNN, MSNBC, Newsmax, News Nation, usual NBC, CNN International. That's 7. Are there any American cable news stations I'm not aware of? If they are, jot them in the chat and I'll make sure my bookers reach out, because I thought we'd been speaking to everyone so far. Should there be a military strategy of having a social media campaign to educate and combat the false narratives the millennials have launched on, false narratives terrorists have launched on millennials? Yes, that's what we're doing. That's why the IDF's Twitter strategy and social media strategy is run by 19-year-old girls, because we're trying to target that demographic, and I think they're absolutely kicking ass and doing a great job there. Why can't other Arab or Muslim countries offer to absorb many of the civilian Palestinians who would agree to leave? Because they don't want them. They understand this is a deeply radicalized population. They want Israel to defeat and destroy Hamas. They just can't say it out loud because they're afraid of the response from their own publics. But they definitely don't want to import that domestic extremism problem into their own countries. Isn't the entire media coverage across the globe an anti-Semitic focus, as Jews are a tiny percentage of the global population? In some ways, the media coverage has an anti-Semitic tinge to it, in some cases. But it's also a product of the fact that Israel is simply an amazing place to report from. As someone told me the other day, you can sit in the lobby of the American Colony Hotel, sipping cocktails, and file a report from occupied East Jerusalem. You can go report on something in the West Bank or be embedded with the Israeli army in Gaza, and then file your story from an air-conditioned Aroma Cafe in Tel Aviv before going for drinks on Dizengoff Street. You didn't have those same facilities in Raqqa or Mosul when 86 nations were carpet bombing ISIS. One of the questions I've been asking myself this war is whether, if we had the same intense media coverage of the world's campaign to destroy ISIS in Syria and Iraq 10 years ago, how much public pressure there would have been to stop those campaigns, how many Iraqis and Syrians would still be alive, and whether ISIS would still be standing, or whether those countries would have said, we know the images are very difficult, we trust our armies are doing everything to avoid civilian casualties, but ISIS has to go. But in any case, you're seeing the Gulf because of the easy availability of access and materials. And Israel is a place where journalists love being sent to cover because it's an awesome place to report from. And so in some ways, we're the victims of our own success. being a free and democratic country. What military tactics seem most effective at getting terrorists out of the tunnels? I can't comment on specific operational matters, but some terrorists have been emerging from the tunnels to surrender. Others have been emerging from the tunnels in order to try to shoot at our forces. And as we have them surrounded for nearly 2 months, we expect they're going to be running out of supplies and are increasingly cut off from the leadership that is hiding far away from them. Are the Houthis really any threat? Yes. The Houthis, their slogan is Allahu Akbar, death to America, death to Israel, cursed be the Jews, victory to Islam. You can't make it up. They really have the self-awareness of cartoon villains, but they are a gang of terror pirates that have been disrupting maritime trade in the Red Sea, taking over ships. They're a threat not only to Israel, but to international peace and security. They've been firing missiles at Eilat that we've had to take down using some extremely advanced missile technology that blows them up in space. The Houthis are an Iranian proxy. They are a branch of Iran's imperialist project, and that threat is going to have to be addressed, absolutely. I'm going to be able to take 2 more questions, and then I'm going to have to hop onto a different interview, I'm afraid. What did Israel find under the Shifa hospital? You know, Israel launched its raid in the Shifa hospital, and immediately a lot of journalists sighed a big sigh of frustration as if they were expecting Israel to pull back the curtain, Wizard of Oz style, and show the vast terror complex behind. It took some time to uncover it, but we found in the yard a 10-meter deep tunnel shaft leading to a 55-meter long tunnel, leading to a blast door with a firing hole in it. And when we breached that blast door, we found a whole tunnel network under the hospital. Now they knew. We have CCTV footage of hostages being abducted into the hospital on 10/7 in broad daylight of all the doctors and plain view of all the doctors and the nurses. They knew, they covered it up, they were complicit with Hamas. We found a vast tunnel network there that was used as a command and control center by Hamas. And when international agencies come and say, hospitals must be protected, they must be protected, they're absolutely right. Hospitals must be protected. They must never be used for military purposes. Because doing that under international law, we didn't write the rules, but under international law, that causes them to lose their protected status and can render them legitimate military targets, which is exactly what Hamas did. Let's see, a last question I'm going to have to take. How can we stop images coming out of Gaza? We can't. These are difficult images, and we're trying to remind the media that the freelance journalists they have on the ground are operating in the context of a brutal, repressive regime, and they're not free to tell the whole story. And that's why they're not showing images of the thousands of Hamas terrorists we've killed, because Hamas won't let them. And on that note, I'm afraid, thank you everyone for your very kind messages. I'm going to have to wrap up. I have another interview now. This may be interview 250 of this war. So I want to thank you all very, very, very much again for listening, for the fantastic questions, for all your work supporting Israel. And I hope that when the situation calms down, and even before then, don't wait for it to calm down, you'll be able to come to visit Israel to find ways to help rebuild this country after the horrible trauma we've been through. I'm just sending the link again where you can go, and there are buttons to all the various social media platforms and the playlist with all my interviews. And thank you very much, everyone, and happy Hanukkah. Thank you.
And Alon, I just want to mention that you used the word intimidation, and we were throughout the South today, and all the mayors were telling us that their citizens are not intimidated, and they're going to move back as soon as the government allows them, and their houses get rebuilt. So thank you.
That's the most Israeli thing possible, trying to bounce back as quickly as possible from disaster and trying to find a way to find normality in the most abnormal circumstances.
Absolutely. So thank you again so much, and hopefully we'll call on you again for in brighter days.
Let's hope for brighter days. But first we have to win. Am Israel Chai.
Am Israel Chai is correct. And now I'm happy to turn it over to our Chief Executive Officer, Jewish National Fund, USA, Russell Robinson.
Thank you, Saul, and I apologize to the people that are behind me. It's so welcome everybody. I'm just going to give a briefing. Saul's telling you there's been quite a program here for our volunteers that's in Israel. If you're thinking about coming to Israel, go online and sign up now. We're well over 1,000 people that are already coming on our volunteer program. I'm going to tell the people that are facing, not facing, go on, post, put hashtag powered by JNF, powered by JNF, make sure everybody sees it. If you want to go, I just have to tell you, we have 65 college students, 65 that are coming on alternative winter break. We got over 35 young professionals who signed up for the week between Christmas and New Year's. And I told you over 1,000 people have now signed up for trips. Rabbis who have called us and said, reserve 10 people from my community, reserve another 20 people. And so we're getting it from all different organizations. JNF of Canada is bringing groups on different weeks. So we're filling up. It's a matter of
Stay where you are.
And it's a matter of told to do something, but I'm told can you hear me on the Zoom? Gary?
We can hear you with an echo, but we can't see you. We can see Saul. Is there any way you can get on the camera, Russell?
If you can't see me, it's better to see Saul anyway. But join up for our volunteer trips that are in Israel. The other parts I want to tell you some of the things that we're doing here in Israel, and that you should understand when you hear Eylon and you're talking about build back. We're starting our rebuild campaign. All the people in the Israel envelope are talking about coming back. You should know that in Shar HaNegev, 2,000 people have already moved back to their communities. In the Eshkol region, there's already 3 communities moving back, and one of the volunteer groups are going to be able to come. Not one, it could be many. We are going to be repainting, replanting, and rebuilding those communities ourselves. So if you sign up for our trips, we're working right now with 3 communities that are in January. We're going to go into their communities. We're going to repaint the houses. We are going to be rebuilding different parts of their community. We're going to be building new parks and being part of their entire rebuilding of their community. And you get to be part by signing up to our volunteer program, and you will be bringing people back to the Israel envelope. So sign up and sign up now. You should know that in the city of Sderot, for instance, there are already plans that we're working with them on a new hub. There will be a technology hub that will bring new businesses and entrepreneurs to the city of Sderot. We're going to be working on resilience center. Some of our programs that were classic signature projects we were working on, which was in Shar HaNegev to build a regional sports complex that will be the envy of all of Israel. That we're going to build a new resilience center in the Eshkol region. And it's going to be the envy of all the places. You get to be part of that by donating to our campaign. And you should know that over 20,000 new donors have come into our campaign. We've raised well over $40 million for our resilience campaign. We have a new $25 million campaign for our rebuild, and already one gift of $6 million has come in. So you get to be part to join us and join the building back the Israel envelope. Bigger, better than anything that was before. It's going to be for our people, for those people over there. What they get to see is really our resilience of our Jewish people. Because we're going to be building life, having children, having parks, having a place that's going to be building new homes. And you're going to be part of building that back. And I want to just end with a couple of things to tell you. In the New York Times, there was an article about the community of Kfar Aza. People, we were there today. It's where a dear friend of ours, myself, Ophir Lipstein, was killed. He stood right at the place by the olive tree in which he lost his life defending that kibbutz. I am telling you that it depends on all of you, the way that you heard that you got to repost on social media. You have to like anything that you see coming from positive Israel experiences. You have to keep reposting them and keep telling the story, because it's you who are the people. The Israel government can hire all the young people they want. The IDF can. You are on the front lines in the army to be able to do it. And if it's Jewish National Fund, put that hashtag powered by JNF, so that more and more people get to join and hear the real story of Israel and what we're doing. And I'm just going to end with two things. There's been a whole story now of donor advised funds. Now, yes, this is going to be pushing the donor advised funds and Jewish National Fund, but I'm going to tell you why. At a donor advised fund, you can advise that money to go anywhere. So for all of you that have donor advised funds in some of those other institutions, they're advising their donor advised funds to be enemies of the state of Israel, enemies of the Jewish people. You're part of that entire program. At Jewish National Fund, we don't do that, or at any other Jewish organization. So if you have your donor advised funds in some of the larger institutions, think about moving it to Jewish National Fund or any Jewish organization, and be part of making sure that you're not part of advised funds that are going into things that are anti-Jewish and anti-Israel. And last, it's about these volunteer trips, and it's what we're seeing across this country, and what we're seeing here in this. There's a unity of our Jewish people that on October 6th, we were talking about a great divide, and we'll be able to come together. It's a crisis. It's a terrible, horrendous crisis. But I have to tell you, here in Israel, there's not an issue of right or left. It's not an issue of religious or non-religious. Across the United States, we're seeing the same thing. We know the lines are black and white. It's about shared values and common destiny. We were talking about building a world Zionist village the day before, to start this new conversation of our Jewish people. We're going to build a Zionist village tomorrow to continue this great conversation of our Jewish people. Thank you. I'm Yisrael Chai.
Thank you, Russell. And it was an incredible day that we spent with some of the mayors, and the resilience is unbelievable. Every one of them said that when we started talking about a World Zionist Village a few years ago, there wasn't as much interest as there is now. So you'll be hearing more about that. Going forwards, our briefings will occur each Wednesday at this time. Next week, our special guest will be retired IDF Colonel and Israeli defense expert Miri Eisen. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for supporting the land and people of Israel through Jewish National Fund USA. I'm Israel Chai. Thank you.